Great. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name's Matt Hingle. I'm a partner at Tendril, which is a Web3 agency from Radical Labs. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Radical or Tendril, Radical is a market insights company that helps the world's leading companies make faster, better, and more confident investments in the future through custom networks of startups and emerging tech leaders. And within Radical, we've built and launched Tendril, which is a new agency specifically designed to help companies learn about and engage with Web3 technologies through unbiased, network-driven research, advisory, and strategy. And today, we're very lucky to be joined by Debra Lutz and Simon Yi, who both have a wealth of experience at the intersection of brands and DAOs. We'll get into their backgrounds more in a bit, but they'll be sharing their perspectives on what DAOs are, how brands can utilize them, and what you can do as a brand to begin experimenting with DAOs, among a variety of other topics. But before we dive in, a little bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions during the session, please type them in the question box in your Zoom at the bottom of the screen. We'll be sure to set aside some time at the end of the webinar to take questions from the audience. And also, we'll make a recording of today's session available to all registrants. So don't worry if you have to drop early or if you want to share the webinar, we'll get you a copy of the recording. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So as I briefly mentioned a few moments ago, both of you are well steeped in the world of Web3 and DAOs. So maybe starting with you, Debra, can you give us a bit of your background on your career thus far, how you made your way to the Web3 space, and what you've been working on over the past few years?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in the world of Web3, I'm a relative newbie. I've really only been in the space for a little over 2 years. And I come by way of Web2 brand. I'm what you could call a serial brand builder. Started my career a while ago with Procter & Gamble and Johnson & Johnson. Spent 17 years at those two CPG companies, building brands, building businesses, working with consumers, and working on just iconic brands like Pringles, Splenda, Tylenol. And the more senior I got, the more I got disillusioned with big companies, and really decided I wanted to cut my teeth on something more entrepreneurial. And one of my passions is restaurants and new food concepts. And so I decided I wanted to help build a restaurant brand. And so I partnered with a startup restaurant, fast casual restaurant company, and worked with them on basically I was a franchisee for the Philadelphia area, and I was franchisee number 4 and built out 4 restaurants over the course of 5 years in the Philadelphia area, and helped this business grow their brand from 16 units to 75 units over that same time frame. So had a lot of fun doing that. Had never operated a restaurant before, so that was a complete learning curve for me. And from that, I sold the business pre-pandemic, thank goodness. Sometimes it's just a matter of luck and timing. And sold that business, and then the pandemic hit, and I said, all right, I got to figure out what I want to do next, and ended up going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole. Came across Web3, initially with Top Shot and NFTs. And really became enthralled with that. And as I dug deeper, I realized, wow, what a great space and new opportunity for brands. I mean, I just saw such a potential for, truly growing brand zealots, improving loyalty programs, and creating new opportunities never seen before. And I've been involved ever since, have been involved in several DAOs, and most recently gmgn DAO. They asked me to become part of their founding team, which it's a DAO that basically is looking to disrupt the CPG industry by developing new ways to bring young upstart brands to life and develop a fan base. So thanks for having me today. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to have you. Right. So Simon, how about you? What's your background?
Hey, yeah, glad to be here. Thanks, Matt, for the invitation. I've been a growth marketer for a little over the last 12 years, spent time at the major agencies like VaynerMedia, led growth for a few VC-backed startups, and ultimately helped them get acquired. And then about 2 years ago was recruited by Consensus Mesh. It's a large incubator and accelerator in the Ethereum ecosystem, and really saw firsthand like just how much the internet is going to change with Web3 technology. It was, honestly a crash course. And coming out of that, I said to myself two things. One, it's time to be player instead of coach. This thing is moving way too fast, and like I gotta learn by doing. And then the second piece in my world is like, okay, so clearly there's a need for agencies, but how do we DAOify it? And really started writing down pen to pad what a community-owned marketing network would look like. And so that's now Myosin.xyz. Been running that with a couple other co-founders, and yeah, we're 60 members strong across 24 countries and cover the gamut in Web3 native marketing.
Amazing. Yeah, great to have you both again. And thank you for the backgrounds. But I imagine there might be some people out there in the audience who are new to the concept of a DAO completely. So maybe to level set before we dive a bit deeper, Simon, could you walk us through what a DAO is at a high level?
Totally. So DAO in short stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. What it means in spirit, I would say, is that it's community operated to some capacity. There's all different flavors of DAOs, but it's not like a 0-1 on or off. It's more of a progressive view of decentralization. So you'll have DAOs like typically in the DeFi ecosystem that's like fully decentralized. They use on-chain voting, all this stuff. And then you have kind of more community DAOs or social DAOs like FWB, where some parts of the decision-making are by the community using consensus, and others are more like community-led initiatives. So all different flavors, but the general view is like it's a more equitable participant-led organization.
Got it. Yeah, and I think that's a great overview. I also think we often see DAOs confused with traditional online communities that have existed for quite some time. So maybe Debra, what would you say are sort of the main ways that DAOs differ from those traditional online communities?
Sure. Yeah. Well, if you think about traditional communities, they typically consist of a group of members who share common beliefs about something. And there's usually some sort of a goal or purpose for the community, but that's not always clearly defined. And with a DAO, there's very much more of a structure. There's a clearly defined mission. There are voting rights, so the members have access to vote on proposals. And there's very clearly, very clear assigned voting systems. And importantly, there's a shared bank account. So one of the things that defines a DAO is that there is a treasury and the community owns that treasury. It's sort of like a modern version of a co-op, if you think about it. But this greater alignment of incentives leads to greater participation by the community. Another key difference is that with traditional communities, they're mostly set up as forums for customers to complain. Reddit, Twitter, that's why the way that the community ends up engaging. There's a lot of complaining, and the company doesn't necessarily have to actually do anything about it. Very different with a DAO, where because of the fact that the members actually feel as though they're owners, and they are actually owners, there's an incentive to not just to complain, but to actually provide solutions. And the other way around, companies must engage. So it's much more of a two-way dialogue, a two-way street versus, typical traditional online communities is a little bit more of a one-way funnel.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know you mentioned a few benefits. Are there any other benefits that come to mind in terms of a DAO structure versus those traditional online communities?
Yeah, so so clear purpose and aligned incentives between a brand or a business and its best customers, for one. You definitely end up with deeper engagement because of the fact that members see themselves as owners. They directly benefit both intrinsically and extrinsically from being involved with the DAO and with the brand. And as a brand, you're able to get real insights to help your brand or your business. There's typically the members have a very diverse and relevant skill set, and you're able to, understand that skill set and leverage that skill set to, get the jobs, the tasks that you want to get done. So it actually becomes, a key tool in your marketing toolkit. It's an enabler to driving loyalty, enabler to driving engagement and creating value and driving growth.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing overview. And I think now, we've sort of walked through some of the basics of what a DAO actually is, right? What it isn't. But let's maybe start to view it from the perspective of a brand. So a question for you both, but maybe let's start with Simon. When you're thinking about the brand to consumer relationship, how might DAOs play a part in disrupting that relationship? And what do you think might change about that relationship?
Yeah, totally. I mean, at Myosin, we call it the great migration from direct to consumer to direct to community. The pivotal difference being that in direct to consumer, the retail middleman was kind of disintermediated. In direct to community, media as a platform, so Facebook, Google, Twitter, they're being cut out as a middleman. And so what's really happening, and this is echoing back to what Debra was saying, is brands have an unprecedented opportunity to market and really co-create with community members. So I think it's a little bit more earnest. B, there's a longer term vision for why the brand and then the community benefits and how it's mutually beneficial. And I think really it's about unlocking a new form of coordination and cooperation between a brand and its consumer base.
Yeah, maybe before passing it over to you, Debra, can you maybe elaborate on what co-creation looks like, maybe to make it more tangible for some people who might not have like a clear view of what that might look like?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, different flavors from different companies. Nike is kind of pioneering in this space. They're not necessarily DAOifying their fan base, but they released something called Nike.swoosh. Basically, what they're doing is they're doubling down on their localization efforts to uplift, creative artists. So, up until this point, they've commissioned artists from all over the world to create, art on iconic shoes, Nike shoes. And now they're moving towards digital collectibles, allowing the creators to actually earn money on sales of the digital skins and participate potentially in the upside of the physical product sales. So, it's a slightly different view of the same thing. The big thing I'd say from a brand perspective is deeper engagement, really putting money where your mouth is now. And then as a result of that, seeing the benefits of really word of mouth marketing and loyalty marketing at its finest.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I guess same question to you, Debra. Any builds on Simon's perspective here?
Yeah, and another example, building off of Simon's, is what we're seeing with Starbucks right now with their Odyssey program. So they've taken their basic loyalty program and they've said, okay, how can we make it better by leveraging the benefits of Web3 and blockchain? And they've developed Odyssey. Now they're doing it in a very smart way because the vast majority of their customers are not Web3 native. So they don't talk about blockchain. They don't talk about NFTs. They don't talk about, wallets. They use very familiar language. The NFTs are actually called stamps. And they use Nifty Gateway, where you actually can pay in dollars to buy things on the marketplace or sell things. You can get money deposited directly into your bank. You don't need to have a wallet. And what they've done is they've opened it up to, I think it's still in beta, but they've opened it up to select customers, and they've opened up a Discord channel. So a lot of DAOs communicate through Discord, and Starbucks is doing that, and they've got moderators to their Discord channel, and they're listening to feedback. They're taking what their users are doing and how they're doing it and what they're saying, and they're using all that feedback to continue to develop the program. So again, it's sort of an incremental step in terms of being able to improve a loyalty program. So in this case, they are offering things like experiences. You can do a virtual tasting, or if you get enough points, you'll actually be invited to an IRL tasting. And they're able to deliver more meaningful experiences. The experiences are being, the feedback is being given by the community, and there's open channels for that collaboration. So just another example. I thought Simon said something very interesting. He said that, one of the things that the DAO does, the DAO model, is that it takes you from a direct to consumer model to a direct to community model. And there's a lot of benefits with that Simon was describing. And another aspect to it is, if you think about it as a marketer, it's extremely efficient to market direct to community as opposed to direct to each consumer. Number one, it's a larger group that you're able to identify very easily. And then number two, you're building these evangelists and these advocates, and they're going to tell all of their friends. So you've got a very clear word of mouth type model with it as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess is the supercharged like word to mouth, or I guess word of mouth marketing, is that because there's ownership in the community, or is that something like unique to DAOs, I guess is my question, maybe to you, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, Deb touched on this earlier, but just to reiterate, I think what ends up happening being a community member of a DAO is that there's a psychological sense of identity formation. And so it's no longer I'm a member of this creative collective online. It's more like I'm an FWB member. This is what it reflects on my life as a creative person. I'm in the know, I'm connected, I'm into Web3. And through that, obviously FWB comes along for the ride. And so it's almost like a badge of honor of sorts. We're also seeing it at Myosin, where members are beginning to change their profile pics to have the Myosin logos in the background. It's just like a quick wink and a smile to say, hey, I'm part of this thing. If you want to learn more, you could reach out to me. So it's just a very interesting shift in how, again, consumers have an sense of identity through a brand.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. Debra, so you've spent years, or at least the last few years, contributing to various DAOs and watching the space pretty closely. So in your experience, have you seen any examples of successful partnerships between maybe a legacy, quote unquote, Web2 brand and a DAO?
Right. Yeah. So I have, and I think you're seeing more and more of it as DAOs are becoming more common and trying to figure out what their strategies are for partnership, as well as these legacy brands trying to figure out, hey, if I'm not going to do something on my own, who in the space should I be partnering with? So you're seeing it more and more, but one that stands out to me in particular, and Simon mentioned it, he talked about FWB, and FWB stands for Friends with Benefits, which is it's a social DAO. So we talked about the different types of DAOs. This is one type of DAO, social DAO. I think there's over 4,000 members in this DAO. And the mission that they have is essentially to run experiments that push the boundaries of Web3 creativity and culture. So they see themselves as these stewards of trying to understand the convergence of these three key areas. And so proposals are created, which is very typical in a DAO, and the members get to vote on those proposals. And there have been several proposals that have been floated around brand partnerships. And so the first one that I'm familiar with was their partnership with Taika, which is a ready-to-drink beverage company. They do mostly coffee and tea beverages. So FWB partnered with Taika to create this first of a kind, digital IRL partnership where through the purchase of an NFT, their members got access to a product that was created specifically for this group. It was actually a yerba mate product, and they called it Metaverse, which play on words. And you find that a lot in Web3, a lot of memes. I mean, it's all meme culture, memes and plays on words with various Web3 references. So anyway, very typical in terms of an IRL partnership where Tyco was responsible for R&D, production, logistics, some of the marketing. And then you had FWB, which was this, community of advocates. They were responsible for, they actually leaned on their membership to build the design and lead the marketing efforts. So they really, they co-created through the community to develop this product. And, as you can imagine, I mean, there's this groundswell of evangelists promoting the product, and enabling distribution all over. In fact, a friend of mine was bummed because he purchased an NFT, but he lived in New Zealand, and the shipping, they couldn't ship it to New Zealand. So he had to, give it to a friend of his in North America. But, a great example of how an existing DAO partnered with a legacy brand. And I think the other one that comes to mind, which is an even more familiar brand, is Hennessy. So again, a partnership, FWB put out a proposal for this partnership with Hennessy. And Hennessy, as most people know, a spirits brand, very well regarded, long-standing tradition. They developed this project to create something called Cafe 11. And again, through the launch of an NFT, people had access to what Cafe 11 had to offer, which was essentially an exclusive membership that featured access to events and tastings and music performances. So again, that idea of trying to figure out how to bring digital and IRL together and how to converge culture and Web3 and really influence. And so in this case, they minted, I believe, about 1,700 NFTs at like $450 each. So pretty nice revenue stream. And the revenues were split. It was 67-33 between Hennessy and FWB. They split kind of the development of the project. And I believe that's been very successful from an influencer standpoint, and certainly from a PR standpoint. These types of partnerships have been wildly successful. So in this case, there was a financial gain. Now, when you look back at the NFTs right now, just given the market, the NFTs are actually priced lower than what they were at the mint. But the companies, generated their revenue targets, and certainly from a buzz and influencer standpoint, they hit their targets as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the question I have is, like, what attributes of those collaborations or co-creation efforts, what made them successful? Was it the level of control that they gave the DAO as a brand who usually takes a lot of control? Like, how are you thinking about why those co-creation or partnership efforts were so successful?
Yeah, I think a couple of factors. One, as you said, I think the excitement of the members, that they had a say and they had certain tasks that they were able to own, and where the brand didn't necessarily have total control over it. And that's one of the biggest, sort of mental hurdles for brands to get over, is that with a DAO, you do have to give up control. You can carve out the areas that you want that control to move to the community, but you do have to give up that control. So I think that did make it, again, from the standpoint of community feeling that value of, hey, we are owners, we have a say in this, we're going to make this happen. That's the power of the DAO. With gmgn, our community members, I mean, that was the reason that they signed up, and that's how they felt about it, was, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to have a say in what the packaging looks like, how we're distributing, what the marketing is, things that as a builder you get excited about, but previously you didn't have the opportunity to do.
Yeah, I think those are fantastic points. I mean, Simon, what about you? What are you seeing on the partnership side outside of FWB?
Yeah, you're saying with brands or just in general as a DAO?
Yeah, I would say with brands specifically.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of an old example, but Vayner3 came out with a partnership with Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch, for Budweiser to basically create a platform for up and coming musicians and giving them a spotlight. So the way this came to life is first, actually, Budweiser bought beer.eth, the ENS. So that was kind of interesting to brand themselves and signal that they're, a technocrat, they're not a Luddite. And then the other interesting thing is, instead of contributing brand sponsorship dollars to, let's say, some sort of music festival or music school, they went ahead and created basically a PRable moment and flew, journalists into their headquarters. And I believe that there were 8 emerging musicians that were featured, and then ultimately that their NFTs were sold. I'm most certain that Budweiser wasn't interested in revenue generation for that, because they have plenty of other revenue streams. But the PR was astounding, right? They're one of the first movers, a legacy brand like Anheuser-Busch that, I think a lot of consumers view as an old consumer brand is now breathing fresh life into it, and obviously reaching the Gen Zers, millennials by doing so. So it's a great example of, it's not necessarily a DAO. It's really more like the brand giving directly to community, and it's a different form of marketing. But it is definitely a noteworthy one.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we talked about partnerships a fair bit. I'm curious, maybe Deb, starting with you, have you come across any examples of a brand actually spinning up a DAO from scratch successfully or at all?
It's funny, we were talking about this the other day, right? When we chatted briefly, and it is really hard to come up with something. I know that you guys had mentioned, and I did look into this one that L'Oreal has put together called Gorgeous, which is really, it's more in their professional line, but it's really been created for creators, makeup artists who are looking at sort of digital makeup application, which is very different from IRL makeup application, because there's so many, ways that you can sort of distort reality. But it's really been set up for, for their creators and builders. And you think about, a makeup brand, you've got a lot of creatives that are in that space. So I think there's a lot of excitement for that, but it's brand new. So jury's still out on its success or what they're doing, but they have, set themselves up as a traditional DAO, issued a token, and there were various ways for them to, for the creators to actually obtain that token to become a part of the DAO. And then the tokenization enables them to have, voting rights and governance, et cetera. So yeah, so that's definitely a pretty cool one. But honestly, I really have to rack my brain. There aren't. And I think it's really interesting. I think certainly there's, it's hitting the headlines all the time now, in terms of regulatory environment and what's the future, et cetera. So I think there's some concerns or some really uncertainty around it. And if as I think about it, with all my years in being in CPG companies, if I took this idea down to my legal department, they would look at me like I had 3 heads, like, why are we doing this? And we have no idea what this means, and let's stay away. So I think, understanding the legal and regulatory structures that can make this possible is a bit of a hurdle. I think this notion of, not necessarily wanting to be the first one out there. It's positive and it's negative. You don't really have, anyone to look to for example. So do you want to stick your neck out there and be the first? And then I think the other thing is, the financial benefits are a little muddy, right? It's not necessarily a direct, like, oh my gosh, now you're going to be selling 1 million more of these widgets. It's softer than that. It really is, in a way, more of a marketing vehicle. And as a new marketing tool, there are no hard ROIs attached to it. But it's certainly, you think about, when social came about, social media marketing, nobody wanted to touch that either. And it took a long time to figure that out. And it took a long time to figure out how best to do it. But the first movers, definitely benefited from it. So, and I think the final thing is probably the fact that, traditionally in typical legacy brand companies, you've got an innovation team and small budgets and a lot of different focus areas to look at. So, right now, AI is kind of the sexy new thing, and, possibly taking over any of the resources that have been put against looking at things like DAOs.
Yeah, I think all of those reasons make sense. Simon, curious, if you've seen anything like a brand, building a DAO from scratch. I take it from your head shaking, it's a no, but just curious.
Yeah, really, really tough to find examples. The one that I could point to is Atom Bomb Squad. They're a small urban, clothing brand focused on the skateboard lifestyle out of LA. They've been around for a little over 20 years, and they've actually minted 20,000 or so NFTs as member passes. Again, not necessarily a DAO, but they are organizing their rabid fan base in Discord and coordinating a ton of events around the country. The notable thing I'd say for a retail brand like them is they've actually enabled royalties of the t-shirt sales for the artwork that you own. So for example, I own a Atom Bomb. It's the one that looks like a watermelon. There was 1 month that they were selling watermelon t-shirts. Unfortunately, my NFT never got sold, so I didn't get anything. But it was a fun experiment to be like, hey, I'm participating as part of this community in a very meaningful way. It's no longer a transaction. It's more like, let's promote each other. And I think it was an interesting, thought experiment. I don't know exactly where the project is going, but it's certainly beginning to pave a way towards how a brand could activate its community.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a very good segue into the regulatory and legal considerations. I know Deb sort of touched on it a bit, but I think it's worth double clicking on. So maybe, Simon, when you're thinking about a challenge with DAOs, like maybe can you get a bit more specific on the legal and regulatory considerations for brands that are looking to experiment, either through partnership or, of course, creation as well?
Yeah, totally. I'd separate there's really two main concerns. One is like having brand control, right? A lot of these brands that we're talking about, they've built their brand and their community over decades, right? And the idea of giving up control for a brand that's been closely curated is incredibly scary for a company, especially if that brand isn't known to be experimental. So there's that kind of reputation risk. And apart from that, from a legal perspective, if you're issuing tokens, generally you have to be careful of something called the Howey test. The Howey test, basically roughly defines what a security is. And so anyone listening, I definitely encourage you to Google that. And so, yeah, jury's a little bit out on what are utility tokens. How do you categorize a social token like FWB? What does it mean to be an owner? Do I make money on this thing? And all of those questions are relatively open-ended right now. As far as domiciliation of company, I can go into that also, but it gets complicated is the TLDR. The US is not really all that a great place to start a DAO, is the short answer. So yeah, lots of things to think through.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I totally agree. Maybe outside of legal and regulatory, Debra, a question for you. What are some of the challenges that a brand might face with working with a DAO?
So I mentioned the giving up control piece. I think that's key. By opening up and giving power to your community, that is a powerful thing. But you have to recognize that you are giving up control, and the last thing you want to do is be seen as, if you're not happy the way the direction of the community is going, taking that control back. Strictly through a DAO, you can't. First and foremost, but also, that's just, that's also a, kind of a PR issue for sure, if you're going to do something like that. So you have to be comfortable with the space that you're giving the community, and that they're going to, have to serve the best intentions with that. I think the other thing is you do need resources to manage the community. Not a ton of resources and not expensive resources, but what you don't want is to build a community and be absent from it. So you want to have a presence. I mean, the community will take on a life of its own, and there'll be the more vocal members and members who are helping other members. But you definitely want to make sure that as the originator and the brand behind the community, that you have a presence, and that you're answering questions, you're engaging with people, and you're basically that you're visible.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of that can be solved, right? They're not necessarily inherent to DAOs. Just, a quick follow on, are there inherent challenges with DAOs, like be it their structure or maybe like participation, things that might not necessarily be changed with like a better tool or, different coordination structures? I'm curious your thoughts there. And maybe Simon, I can pass it to you as well.
Yeah, totally. The general rule of thumb, or I guess like litmus test, is there's a 99-1 breakdown of 90 like if you have 100 members, 90 are lurkers, 9 are active, and 1 is like a super user. And so, the chips are really stacked against you as a community manager, and it's up to the CM team to really activate those lurkers to be more active participants. The methods to get there, there's many of them. You could do something as simple as a GM bot, where you're gamifying how many people are saying GM in Discord, which sounds stupid, but actually it drives like daily usage. So there is something there. And then it can go to all the way something like funding a community-led initiative. For us at Myosin, we do something called Myosin House, where we take over a house during a crypto conference, invite a bunch of leaders to hang out over a private dinner and really connect as people. And that's beginning to take off for us, where the members are really taking ownership of that and saying, hey, are we going to be at this conference? Where are we going to post up? Who are we inviting? What's the merch look like, et cetera? So different forms of engagement. Again, the chips are stacked against you when you launch a Discord, and it really is important to be thoughtful about how that member journey experience looks.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And maybe staying with you, if you're a brand and you're thinking about partnering with a DAO versus building your own, what are the main considerations there? I know Deb kind of talked about resources. There are those regulatory concerns, but I'm curious, what your mental calculus is through the lens of a brand.
Yeah, definitely. I think DAOs are having their own brand identity moments as well. So some DAOs are known to be experimental and lean more tech. Others are social. Others are, more investment led. So, first and foremost, the brand manager needs to think through what is the community that I'm after? What values do I want to infuse in my brand? To really begin to narrow the list of options. And then, sorry, you were saying challenges of working with?
Yeah, I would say, benefits and challenges. Like how are you weighing those for each approach?
Yeah, I mean, benefits are very clear. Deborah kind of highlighted this earlier, but participation is huge. Community members feel empowered to share what they're working on, and it's a very clear word of mouth strategy for a brand working with a DAO. Some challenges would be, again, about control and potentially financial alignment. On the control side, it's how much does the DAO member or DAO itself get to control the direction of the project or the brand, perception, et cetera, activation. And then the other part is like, how does the dollar and cents split up? Is it paid out to the DAO? Is it a service fee up front? Do the members get upside of the native token, et cetera? There are no wrong answers here, which make it exciting and also dizzying at the same time. But it really depends on the brand.
Yeah.
And Matt, if I can jump in for a sec,
Please do.
Also thinking about the difference between starting up your own DAO versus partnering with a DAO. I think it starts first and foremost with what's your objective. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Certainly, if it's about borrowing a like-minded community for a partnership on a project like this, is where like the Hennessy, comes in. Like FWB was, perfect because they believed in being at the forefront of culture and creativity, and so they were able to, really leverage that borrowed community. But if you're a business or your brand that's trying to figure out, a new product for your brand or a distribution channel, or, even if you're, interested in, taking a particular brand that hasn't gotten a lot of love at your company and, giving it to the community to see what they can do with it. In that case, you're probably better off building your own DAO, because you really want to align, you really want to get your brand advocates and your brand zealots. So you want people who are familiar with that brand, people who maybe have the right skill sets, as opposed to relying on another community to do it.
Yeah, I think those are fantastic points. So Deb, let's say as a brand, you're committed to building your own DAO from scratch. What are maybe three, we'll put guardrails on it, three core elements you'd say define a successful DAO?
Yeah, I think, community size. Now, it doesn't have to be huge, but you need to be able to bring in enough members to create a thriving community. Simon talked about the engagement piece. If you've got, 10 people in your community, you're not going to get that, you're not going to get that engaging IRL dinner or the poker night or things like that. So you have to have a certain critical mass in the community. But that can be, if you go back to the 99-1 rule, it could be, a couple of hundred members, because then you're going to have, 20 members who are really engaged and willing to take on work and be advocates and do the things that you need to do. So, it's not tremendous, but you want to have that critical mass. And then it's also really looking at the quality of the members. Who are they? What's their experience with your brand? What are their skills? Can they do the things that you're asking them to do? So I think that's another critical piece, is really, understanding who your members are. And there's, a lot of, there are people who want to stay anonymous, but they're very willing to share kind of what their background is, what their skills are, things that they can do to help contribute. And then I guess probably the third area would be, how are your members engaging? I think you really can tell the health of the community based on how they're engaging. Are they active with their posts? Are they providing ideas? Are they voting? What percentage of your membership is actually voting on proposals? That's something that, I'm a part of Krause House, which is a DAO with a group of people looking to buy a professional basketball team, an NBA team. And we've actually expanded, and we're doing a lot of things to redefine the future of sports, which is really exciting. And one of the things that, we look at is, okay, when we put a proposal up, who's voting and what percentage of our community is voting? Are we engaging them, or do we need other ways to get them engaged? Are people making referrals? That's another thing that we also look at. Are your friends, are you telling your friends about it, and are you bringing people in? So really, looking at the engagement of your community and working on ways to maximize that engagement is really key.
Yeah, totally. And I guess sticking through like the brand lens, right? Does it make sense to start more centralized and decentralize over time? Do you start decentralized and issue a token? If you had to give advice, what would you recommend?
I can take that one. I would say,
Sure.
Generally, don't decentralize too early, because it is amazing, but also creates a lot of chaos potentially. So, need guardrails to be able to manage that chaos, or at least encourage it to go in a specific direction. I would say, counter to my own point, is why is a brand trying to DAOify something? If the answer to that is anything shy of like, I want to work with a community and see what we can build together, I think it would change the nature of that relationship to look something closer to an agency being hired or a set of freelancers getting hired. Nothing wrong with that, right? Like, there's plenty of economic exchange happening there, but the critical piece is the DAO is a collective entity that the members have a shared identity with.
Perfect. Yeah, well said. So I guess before we turn to questions from the audience, because I do want to be mindful of time, I'd maybe love some final actionable thoughts from both of you. So starting with Simon, what do you think are 3 things a brand can do today to start experimenting with DAOs? They can be small, they can be large. What would you recommend?
Yeah, I would go with the 99-1 model and say lurk, find 10 DAOs, lurk around, see how people operate on a weekly basis, see ideally like mutual connections across the DAOs that you're a part of, reach out to them, see why they joined, trade notes. And then, among the communities that you initially joined, see how you want to participate and become how you want to show up. And really be earnest about it, because I think the more honest you are with yourself, the more the community will see that. And then if it makes sense, potentially join a guild or be one of the, let's call it, board of directors for the month or for the quarter, or however they govern themselves. And you'll see how, the inner workings of how a DAO is actually governed and operated. It's 3 very different views. I definitely wouldn't recommend joining 10 DAOs at once and being a core member. Like, you really will regret it. Start with your passion and go very slowly, for sure.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And Deb, what about you? Any recommendations?
I mean, that's great. That's definitely step 1 to participate in DAOs that exist. Step 2, if you feel like, hey, this is something that you want for your brand or your business, establish that mission. What's going to be the purpose of your DAO? Get real clear on that, and then start to make a plan of how you're going to bring people together. How are you going to invite people into the community, and how you're going to keep them engaged? Those are going to be your key things to to really get yourself set up to be successful with the DAO.
Amazing. So I've gone ahead and accumulated a few questions from the audience. So I guess we can run through these now. So the first is, what advice would you give to brands who are hesitant to develop either a DAO or even a general Web3 strategy in light of the current macroeconomic environment? Simon, maybe do you want to take this one?
This is a little bit tough because I wish I had more info about why the brand is hesitant. I mean, that could be regulatory, that could be, reputation of the brand, all these different kind of avenues. But what I would say is, let's go back to first principles. What is the initiative trying to unlock? Is it PR? Is it a deeper sense of DE&I initiatives that come to life? Because that really dictates how much you dip your toe or your foot into the water. And then general Web3 strategies. I mean, it's such a big industry. You can go anywhere from how you store data online in a shared drive to, how your controller manages treasury funds for the company that you're in, all the way to marketing, strategy, and execution. So, the macroeconomic environment certainly is not fun. It's not cute right now. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity to experiment, and not everything needs to be a token. Not everything needs to be revenue sharing. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for smart brand managers who want to empower their community and see how far that goes. There's a ton of there.
For sure. We have one about just generally learning more about DAOs. So I guess, Deb, outside of getting into the Discord and joining DAOs and buying tokens or NFTs, what is the best way for a brand or a brand leader to learn more about DAOs and how they operate?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like getting that experience firsthand. So I think you have to do that. There's a ton of literature out there. You can read about it online for sure, but until you actually participate, participate in a proposal process, participate in a vote. I totally agree with Simon. Don't go and join 10 because your head will be spinning. But, early on, I joined a couple. And like I mentioned earlier, Krause House is one that I got, really attached to. And, I true to kind of like what we've said a DAO is, I said what my skills were, and they needed someone to head up their media team. So I did that for a couple of seasons. And then someone else who was in the DAO who I became friendly with, the two of us started talking about how, Krause House was great, but it didn't really have a brand identity. And so, we went old school and developed, basically, a whole, iconography and an identity handbook. I mean, the whole 9 yards. And, we went and did that for the DAO. So, and then, from there, I just got more and more involved. And so, absolutely something, there's plenty of DAOs out there, find one that you're excited about, get involved. And then I guess the other thing would just be, there's also lots of, very smart people, agency wise, like a Radical, like a Myosin, who know a lot about it, who can really, walk you through the process. And that's another avenue to go as well.
We have one here about partnership assessment. So what should brands look for when assessing which DAOs to partner with? Simon, maybe you can take this one.
Yeah, totally. I mean, first and foremost, I think it's prudent for a brand to understand what the DAO's brand is. So you can probably sniff around on Twitter or take a look at what the founding team is saying on these podcasts that they're probably a part of, just to get a feel for like the ethos of why they're doing what they're doing, because I think that's super important for brand managers to know. And then I would say, to Debra's point, join the Discord, see how much participation there is. Sometimes there's a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and that's disguised as a lot of emoticons and very, very quick, messages on Discord. So sentiment is probably also important. And yeah, like see where the gaps are, because I think that there's a lot of gaps where DAO members have this big bold vision but don't necessarily have the means or don't necessarily have the microphone that brands do. So there's a big opportunity to partner and achieve that mission together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can end on a fun one. So question for both of you, and maybe we'll start with Deb. What are your favorite DAOs in the market that brands could partner with?
Yeah, so FWB clearly, Nouns DAO is a great one that's doing a lot of partnerships and a lot of really fun, smart things. And of course, you can always talk to us at gmgn.
I love it. Simon, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, +1 on Nouns DAO. I'd say also check out Boys Club. They're more of a community than a DAO, but what's great is that, Boys Club is an ironically named community they call themselves a no bro zone for the crypto curious. So it's intended for people who are women and non-binary and LGBTQ. And they've really built an incredible media brand in a very short amount of time. It looks like they are partnering with brands, Web2 and Web3. And it's really intended for any brand who wants to enter Web3 in a safe way, reach a consumer base that's typically overlooked, and build something together. So, definitely reach out to those ladies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think with that, we can go ahead and conclude today's webinar. I wanted to thank those who have attended today and give a special thanks to both Debra and Simon for sharing your perspectives with us. If people want to get in touch with you directly, where can they find you, Debra and Simon? Maybe Debra, go ahead first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Twitter DM at DebLutz33, or my email is dlutzer, LUTZER3 at gmail.com.
What about you, Simon?
You can find me at Douch on Twitter or Telegram, DA0UCH. It's short for decentralized. Don't decentralize too early, in case you're wondering what it's about. Otherwise, you'll say Douch. And then email is Myosin.xyz.
Amazing. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. But thanks, everyone. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.